Brahmanath. Om. Om. Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. Swastha.
Hello students, good morning. Welcome to Unit 2 of 3 questions. Before we go to Unit 2, let's just recapitulate or memorize Unit 1. In Unit 1, a king had 3 questions in mind. And what were the 3 questions? What was the right time for every action? The second question, who were the most necessary people? And the third question, what was the most important thing to do or the most important occupation? Having 3 questions in mind, the king proclaimed or officially announced in his kingdom, whoever would answer the 3 questions, he would reward them. Many learned people came to his kingdom, and various were the answers to all the 3 questions. The king wasn't satisfied. He wasn't happy with the answer. So he decided to meet a hermit. Hermit. Hermit means a holy man who lives alone, or you can take a saintly man or a sage is known as a hermit. So he decided to meet a hermit and find out his answer to the 3 questions. Now let's go to Unit 2. In Unit 2, we are going to learn how the king went to the hermit who lived in the wood in a single cell. And what did he do and how did he get his answers? I go to the text. The hermit lived in a wood which he never quitted, and he received none but common flock. So the king, he wanted to go to the hermit. Now where did the hermit live? The hermit lived in a wood. You have come across this word in the poem. Wood is a scratch or an area which is covered with long trees, and you don't find wild animals living there. Okay? So that's called a wood. And the hermit lived in a wood and he received none but common flock. Common flock. We are known as common flock. So common people are known as common flock. So the king put on simple clothes and before reaching the hermit's cell, dismounted from his horse and leaving his bodyguard behind, went on alone. As the king entertained only the common people, so the king, he was a king, he had gone with soldiers, he had gone on a horse, and so what did he do? He had to make himself look like a common person. So he got off. Dismounted means to get off or to got off. He got off from the horse and he just left his bodyguard, his soldiers, everybody back, and all alone he walked close to the single cell or the single room or the small house of the hermit. When the king approached, the hermit was digging the ground in front of his hut. So what was the hermit doing? When the king reached the hermit's house, the hermit was digging. What do you mean by dig? A pointed instrument to turn the soil out of the earth. That is called to dig. The hermit was digging the ground in front of his hut. Seeing the king, he greeted him and went on digging. So seeing the king, he did not stop. He continued his work, he continued his digging. The hermit was frail and weak, and each time he stuck his spade into the ground and turned a little earth, he breathed heavily. digging the ground. And when the king went close, he continued his work. He just greeted the king and he went on doing that digging what he was doing. The hermit was frail. Frail means weak and thin. Frail means weak and thin. The hermit was a very thin and weak man. And so what did he have at the time with him? He had a spade. Spade is actually a digging instrument through which you dig the ground, dig the soil, okay? And he stuck his spade into the ground as he was a very thin and weak fellow, the hermit. So he was trying to remove a little soil. Turn a little earth means remove a little soil from the ground. And because he was very weak and thin, he breathed heavily because he was feeling restless as he was very weak and thin. Digging or removing a little soil from the earth, he was becoming breathless. The king went up to him and said, I have come to you, wise hermit, to ask you to answer 3 questions. How can I learn to do the right thing at the right time? Who are the people I most need, and to whom should I therefore pay more attention than to the rest? And what affairs are the most important and need my first attention? So the king went up to the hermit, went close to the hermit, and very politely the king did ask. He said that, I have 3 questions and I want answer to my 3 questions. And he narrated the 3 questions to the hermit, that what was the right time for every action, who were the most necessary or important people, and what was the most important thing or affair or work to do. He asked the 3 questions to the hermit, who he means the king asked the 3 questions to the hermit, getting close to the hermit who was digging or removing soil from the earth and was becoming breathless because he was thin and weak, or weak and thin. The hermit listened to the king but answered nothing. He just spit on his hand and recommenced digging. Spit here means to, it's a past tense of spit. When you throw saliva on your palm, on your hand, okay? So the hermit heard the questions, what the king said, but he did not answer anything. The hermit did not answer. Rather, he continued his work. What did he do? He just spit on his hand and he recommenced. Recommence means to continue digging. You're tired, said the king. Let me take the spade and work a while for you. So the king here offered his candidature to do the work. What did the king say? The king told the hermit, when the hermit continued his work, he heard the questions, did not answer. The king offered himself and he said that, now you're tired, why don't you give me the spade and I will dig the soil. You take rest for a while or for some time. Thanks, said the hermit, and giving the spade to the king, he sat down on the ground. The hermit immediately thanked the king and he handed over the spade to the king, and the hermit sat down. When he had dug 2 beds, the king stopped and repeated his questions. So when 2 beds were dug, you know what's digging? I told you that with a pointed instrument, you break a pointed instrument to turn the soil or remove the soil from the ground or from the earth, whatever you take it as. So 2 beds, when you want to plant trees, first we make beds, then we just pour the seeds, okay? Then we water them, and then we have saplings and so on. We make beds first, rows, okay? That's called the beds. Those are called the beds, the rows that are made. So the king had dug 2 beds and the king stopped now. And he repeated his questions to the hermit who was now resting for some time on the ground. The hermit again gave no answer but rose, stretched out his hand for the spade and said, "Now rest a while and let me work a bit." So the moment the king put the questions again to the hermit without answering said, he rose. Rose is the past tense of rise, to get up. As he was resting, he was sitting for some time, he got up. He did not answer the questions, rather he got up and he stretched his hand, means he took his hand forward to ask for the spade, the instrument to dig the soil or the ground or the earth. So he just said, what did hermit say now? Instead of answering the questions, hermit said, "No, you rest a while and you give me the spade and let me work a bit." But the king did not give him the spade and continued to dig. But the king refused and continued digging. 1 hour passed and another. The sun began to sink behind the trees, and the king at last stuck the spade into the ground and said, so 1 hour passed when the hermit offered, "Now you give me the spade and let me work for a while, a bit, and you take rest." The king refused, and the king started digging without listening to the hermit. And 1 hour passed, and then another hour, and now it was time, it was evening time. The sun began to sink behind the trees, means it was evening time, dusk hour, it was getting to the dusk hour, the evening hour. The sun was now going to set. And the king at last stuck the spade into the ground and said, now the king had come or had been there not to help the hermit to do the work. Now the king was a bit irritated, he was getting angry because he had gone, his intention was to meet the hermit, a man filled or renowned of wisdom, to get answer to his 3 questions. And the hermit was, every time, he had asked twice now the questions to the hermit, and both the times the hermit just remained as if he was remaining ignorant, as if he was not listening or he did not want to answer the king. So the king, being a little angry, he stuck the spade into the ground and said, "I came to you, wise man, for an answer to my questions. If you can give me none, tell me so, and I will return home." So the king, being a little angry now, he did point out the hermit and say that I have come to you, wise man, to ask answer to my 3 questions. Now if you are not interested or you don't want to give answer to my 3 questions, you tell me directly, instead of trying to hesitate or ignore me. Just tell me directly and I will return back home. "Here comes someone running," said the hermit. "Let us see who it is." So instead of answering again, the hermit diverted the talk and wanted the king to hear, to listen, that someone was now running and coming and getting closer to them. The king turned around and saw a bearded man come running out of the wood. The man held his hands pressed against his stomach, and blood was flowing from under them. So when the hermit, instead of answering again, ignored and tried to divert the king's mind and asked him to see that somebody was coming closer, running towards them. The king turned around to see who was that. Saw a bearded man, okay, and the man was having a wound, was hurt in the stomach, badly hurt, because blood was flowing from the stomach, and the wounded man, or the bearded man who was wounded, had his hands pressed on the stomach, trying to stop the flow of the blood which was going on continuously. The bearded man whose blood was flowing from the stomach had pressed his hands on the stomach and came running towards the hermit and the king. When he reached the king, he fell fainting on the ground, moaning feebly. So when the wounded man reached the king and the hermit, he just fell fainting, lost his conscience, he just lost his senses. Okay, he was about to lose his senses and he moaning. Moan means here crying, he started crying, and feebly means weakly, he started crying weakly in a very slow, low voice because he was completely grabbed with the pain. He was badly hurt in the stomach and blood was flowing. The king and the hermit unfastened the man's clothing. Unfastened means opened. Okay, to open or opened. The king and the hermit opened the clothes of the wounded man. There was a large wound in his stomach. The king washed it as best he could and bandaged it with his handkerchief and with the towel the hermit had. So, what did the king do? When the man reached the hut or the single cell in the woods of the hermit, when the man came running and he fell down fainting and he had a wound, and from the wound that was in the stomach, blood was flowing like anything. He had pressed his stomach because he wanted to stop the flowing of the blood. And when the wounded man reached the king and the hermit, he just fell down fainting and he was crying weakly, very slowly because he was completely grabbed with pain. He was having severe pain. The king and the hermit, they opened his clothes, and then what did the king do? Then there was a large wound in the stomach. The king washed as best he could do the wound. He cleaned the wound, okay, and bandaged it with handkerchief and with a towel the hermit had, and bandaged the wound, cleaned the wound, cleaned the flow of the blood and the blood that was scattered and scared everywhere. He cleaned it, he cleaned the wound, and then after cleaning, he bandaged the wound with a handkerchief and a towel that the hermit had. Okay, and the king washed it as best he could and bandaged it with his handkerchief and with the towel the hermit had. But the blood would not stop flowing, and the king again and again removed the bandage soaked with warm blood and washed and re-bandaged the wound. After putting a bandage with his handkerchief and a towel that the hermit had, the flowing of the blood did not stop. It did not pause, okay? It did not come to an end. It kept on flowing. So what did the king do? And the blood was getting soaked, means absorbed, okay? The blood was getting absorbed, that warm blood. So the king again washed the wound and the flowing of the blood again, and then re-bandaged the wound. When at last the blood ceased flowing, cease means to stop. Here cease means to stop or stopped flowing. The man revived and asked for something to drink. That means the man felt a little better. And then when he felt a little better, he wanted little water to drink. He asked for little water to drink. The king brought fresh water and gave it to him. The king offered fresh water to drink. Meanwhile, the sun had set and it had become cool because it was dusker. Now it was the night time, and it was already, the dusk had passed away. It was the night time and the atmosphere had become cool. The sun had set. So meanwhile, the sun had set and it had become cool. So the king, with the hermit's help, carried the wounded man into the hut and laid him on the bed. So as it had come to the night time now, the king, with the help of the hermit, both of them together, they carried the wounded man and laid him on the bed. Lying on the bed, the man closed his eyes and was quiet. But the king was so tired with his walk and with his work he had done that that he crouched down on the threshold and also fell asleep so soundly that he slept all through the short summer night. So when the king and the hermit carried the wounded man inside the cell or the small house where there was a bed, and they laid him on the bed, after that the man very silently closed his eyes and went to sleep. But the king, he is a king, and kings, they lead a very, very comfortable, cozy life. They are not accustomed of doing so much of hard work. Even if they want a glass of water in their hand, that also comes to them. They have servants, they have slaves, they have people to take care of everything. How luxurious life a king leads. And today, at this point of time, the king trying to present himself as a gentle, as a common person, as a common flock, because the hermit only entertained gentle or common people. So he became a common person to him, and so he had done so much of work. He had digged the soil, he had cleaned the wound of the bearded wounded man, he had bandaged and rebandaged, gave him water, and so much of work, carried him onto the bed where he laid down, and the king had done so much of hard work which he is not accustomed of doing, because a king leads a lavish and a luxurious life, and he has people around him to do everything what he wants. And today he had worked a lot of hard work he had done. So, but the king was so tired with his walk and with his work he had done that he crouched. Crouch means it's the posture of sitting. When you bend the hands or legs while sleeping or sitting. Your hands and legs are very close to your body or your stomach when you sleep or you sit. That's a posture of sitting or sleeping. So crouch down on the threshold. Threshold means your doorstep. Okay? Near the doorstep. And also fell asleep. So the king fell asleep because he had done a lot of hard work. So soundly that he slept all through the short summer night. He was so tired and exhausted doing so much of work which he was not habituated of doing. So he just went to sleep and he slept the entire short summer night. When he woke up in the morning, it was long before he could remember where he was. Obviously, it was like a dream, a nightmare for him. He was a king. Where does he sleep? How luxurious is his bed? How luxurious and lavish is his room, sleeping room, his bedroom? And now when he got up in the morning, he was a bit surprised. He couldn't remember where he was. He was actually sleeping near the threshold or the doorstep of a small single room of the hermit. Oh, who was the strange bearded man lying on the bed and gazing intently at him with shining eyes? He couldn't even recollect who was the man. The man had got up, the wounded man or the bearded man had got up and lying on the bed, he was focusing, he was looking constantly, intently with earnest attention. Earnest means serious, with serious attention. That wounded man lying on the bed was looking at the king with a fixed look. Gaze means a fixed or a constant look. Okay? And with shining eyes, the king couldn't even recollect or remember who was the man. "Forgive me," said the bearded man in a weak voice. When he saw that the king was awake and was looking at him. So the wounded man very weakly asked for sorry. He begged for an excuse. He apologized, saying, "Forgive me." When the king got up and the king also started looking at him. "I do not know you and have nothing to forgive you for," said the king. So the king was a bit surprised. "I do not know you, and for what should I forgive you then? When I don't know you, there's no reason of forgiving you for anything. You do not know me, but I know you," the wounded man said to the king. "You do not know me, but I know you well, pretty well. word and standing up for yourself. Swear means to promise or take an oath. So he said, the wounded man said to the king, you do not know me, but I know you, because you are that person whom I had taken a promise or an oath to take revenge on you. Why? Because you executed his brother and seized his property. Okay? He had executed. Executed means, it's written here, punished by death. The king had given a death punishment, a death sentence to his brother and seized his property. I knew you had gone alone to see the hermit, and I resolved to kill you on your way back. So the wounded man is saying this to the king, that I knew very well you have come all alone. You have stopped your bodyguard soldiers and you have come alone to the hermit's house, to the hermit's place in Ud. Knowing that I had planned, I had decided that I am going to kill you and take the revenge of my brother. But the day passed and you did not return. The wounded man is saying that the day went past. Okay, and I kept on waiting for you to kill you, as I had decided to kill you and take revenge on you. But you did not turn up, you did not come. So I came out from my ambush to find you, and I came upon your bodyguard, and they recognized me and wounded me. So what did the wounded man or the bearded man say? That as I was ambushed means hiding or hiding place. Okay, so he said that I was hiding there to kill you, to take revenge. But as you did not return and the day passed, I came out of my hiding place, out of my ambush, and I was recognized, I was pointed out by your bodyguards, and they wounded me, they tried to kill me. I escaped from them, but should have bled to death had you not dressed my wound. So the wounded man or the bearded man says to the king, O king, I escaped from them, from your bodyguards who wanted to kill me and they wounded me severely. I escaped from them and I came running towards you. And you are the savior. You saved my life. If you wouldn't have cleaned the blood that flowed from my stomach, if you wouldn't have cleaned it, bandaged it, rebandaged it, bled to death means die out of bleeding. Die out of bleeding. So I would have died of bleeding if you wouldn't have cleaned my wound, bandaged and rebandaged it. And so you are the savior. You are the one who has saved my life. I wish to kill you and you have saved my life. So he throws an apology. He says, I wanted to kill you. I had resolved, I decided that I will kill you. But you saved my life. Now, if I live and if you wish it, I will serve you as your most faithful slave and will bid my sons to do the same. Forgive me. Now the wounded man or the bearded man pleads before the king. He confesses, gets on his knees and says to the king that now as you have saved my life, and if it's your wish now, if you wish and desire that you would give me life, I would live, then I surrender myself. I give my candidature. I give my life as a servant to you. A slave means a servant. I would be a servant to you my entire life. And bid. I have written the meaning of bid. Bid means to offer. I would also offer my sons their work. They also would be slaves and servants under you. And he pleads for mercy. He asks for forgiveness to forgive him. The king was very glad to have made peace with his enemies so easily. The king was very happy because he's a king. When they have differences, that gets settled down only in war fields. Okay, they have battles, weapons, bloodshed and all. But this time, having peace settlement with an enemy so easily without any war, conflict, no weapons, nothing, with talks, he was very, very happy. And to have gained him for a friend, and he had not only forgave him, but said he would send his servants and his own physician to attend him and promised to restore his property. Restore means to give back. So here the king was very happy and delighted that he had made friendship with his enemy, and that was so easily done without any conflict, without a fight, without any weapon, without any bloodshed. The king was very happy, very delighted that he had become, now the enemy had turned as a friend and both had become friends. Not only that, the king also told him that I would send my own personal physicians who would treat you, your wound. They would treat you, and he promised to give back all the property that the king had accumulated, he had gathered of his brother's property that the king had taken and had given a death punishment to his brother. His brother means wounded man's brother, or the bearded man's brother. So with this we have completed unit 2. Before we pause up, before we stop, I would just like to quickly summarize what did we learn today in this class. In this class we came to know that the king, wanting to know the answer to his 3 questions, went to the hermit. The hermit, who lived in a single cell or a small room in youth, was digging the soil. When the king went, he continued his work, but he just greeted the king and he continued his work. The king threw his 3 questions, and when he said his 3 questions and wanted the answer, the hermit did not answer, rather continued his work. So the king offered his candidature, or he offered that I would work for you and why don't you sit down. And then when the king again asked the 3 questions, the hermit again tried to avoid the questions and he did not answer him. And rather he tried to point him out, showing that somebody came running towards them. When the king turned around, he saw that a bearded man who was severely wounded in the stomach and blood was flowing came running towards them, crying, and with a weak sound he was crying. The king and the hermit treated the man. They opened his clothes. The king washed the wound, bandaged with his handkerchief and a towel that the hermit had. But the flowing of the blood did not stop. And so the king again opened the bandage, cleaned the flowing of the blood in the wound and again rebandaged. The wounded man felt a little better. And when he was put